Welcome back to another episode in my everyday cosplay series where I take costume pieces from my favorite movies and shows and turn them into everyday accessories that you can wear all the time. In the second season of House of the Dragon, Rhaenyra wears a couple versions of this embroidered dragon belt, and needless to say, I was obsessed. So I had to design a leather version of the belt. First, I sketched up a rough design and then digitized it and refined it and added more detail as I went, which is my usual sort of designing process. I actually made the belt while camping, so if you're wondering about the gingham tablecloth, that's what's going on. I cut along the dotted lines, taped my pattern together, and then cut out the outline of the belt. I dampened the leather, laid my pattern on top, and then traced over the lines to transfer. Here's what it looks like with the design all transferred. Then I used a swivel knife to carve in all of the background scales. I chose to use only a swivel knife on the background scales, but you could go even further and use a bevel stamp to create a lot of depth with them. I also carved around the dragons with a swivel knife. Here's what it looked like when I was done using the swivel knife, and then I began tooling. I used this stamp here for my backgrounding, and I just used it to create a little bit of texture around the dragons. I used a mule's foot stamp for the dragon scales. I went all around the edges of everything with a bevel stamp, and I also used the bevel stamp to create a little bit of depth in various areas. I used it along the stomach scales and on the wings. I have two different sizes of bevelers that I use for this kind of work. It can get really tricky around the little small areas, but just go slow and don't be afraid to go over the same area twice to smooth everything out. I also used a stylus in a few areas just to refine some of the smaller details and smooth them out. And here's what the belt looked like when I was done with all of my tooling. I used an edge beveler to round off the edge of the belt. This is optional. After leaving the leather to dry completely, I began dyeing it. First off, I started with this gray dye, which I ultimately ended up covering with paint, so this step was unnecessary. Then I dyed the background with red Phoebing's dye. Then I used a paintbrush to apply acrylic paint. I used gold paint on the flames and silver paint on the dragons. Here's what it looked like all painted. Then after letting it dry completely, I covered everything with finish. And once that was dry, I used Phoebing's Antique Finish paste, just applying this with a paintbrush because I forgot to bring my gloves, and just swirling it around to make sure it's filling in all the carvings. I applied the paste to the entire belt and then rubbed the excess off of the surface using a flattened paper towel. This leaves the paste only filling in the carvings, making them stand out. Here's my antique paste just drying on my camping chair. Once I got home, I used my airbrush to apply a final coat of finish. Then I punched out the lace holes, added elastic to lace it up, and done. I already made Aemon's eye patch here and some cuffs inspired by Rhaenyra's season 1 outfit here. So go check out those videos and tell me what I should make next.